Not really going to be talking about the injured guys in this video. Obviously, we know Ramondre Stevenson is plummeting. Obviously, we know Tank Dell is out for the season. But instead, I want to look at the disappointing players from an actual play perspective and underlying usage. Starting off with what we have in Carolina, where over the past 2 weeks, Adam Thielen really has fallen off the face of the planet, right? You're looking at a wide receiver that has had 9 targets over the past 2 weeks, totaling for 27 receiving yards. And if you compare this to what you had earlier on in the season, you had Adam Thielen dominating. Remember back in the days when people were screaming at us for saying to Salamai, 145 receiving yards in the touchdown, 54 receiving yards in the touchdown, 107 in a touchdown, 115 in a touchdown, consistently seeing 10, 11, 12 targets every single week. Well, now this is no longer the case, and it's honestly kind of easy to explain why, right? One, you have a little bit of natural wide receiver volatility. We saw the peak of Adam Thielen earlier. Now we are seeing the valley of Adam Thielen over the past 2 weeks. The reality of the situation is Adam Thielen probably should project out to be somewhere in the middle between these two, right? It's not going to be as good as what you have with 11, 12 targets, but it's not going to be as bad as what you have with 3 to 4 targets from a week-to-week perspective. The second thing that we have with Adam Thielen is this is a wide receiver that is 33 years old. You don't expect 33-year-old wide receivers to get better as the season goes on. You expect them to give you their best at the beginning of the season and then fade, whereas on the opposite end of the spectrum, you're expecting rookies such as Jonathan Mingo to give you their worst at the beginning of the season and then to move up the overall depth chart and get more and more involved into their respective offenses. That's exactly what we're having here, where you are having Adam Thielen fade down the back stretch. You are having Jonathan Mingo, I don't want to say emerge as the wide receiver one in this offense, but at least take more and more of a role here. The reality of the situation is Adam Thielen's probably going to be better than he's been over the past 2 weeks. He's not going to get back to where he was having 100 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown pretty much every single week. He's going to project out to be a high-end wide receiver 3 in this offense, where most likely the volume will be there, but it's just one of the worst offenses in the entire NFL at this point. Now, let's go over and look at what we have with the Los Angeles Chargers options, where Justin Herbert over the past 2 weeks has been very disappointing. Justin Herbert, 212 and 217 when it comes to his overall passing yards. I mean, this is the 3rd straight week where he has not hit 300 passing yards. Now, if you're looking at the Los Angeles Chargers this season, obviously, this has been a bad team top to bottom. I think everybody can agree that the Chargers have been disappointing overall. But if you look underlying what we've actually had from Justin Herbert with all this disappointment, he's still actually been okay. I mean, this is a quarterback that currently is top 5 in the NFL in overall points from a week-to-week perspective, specifically at the quarterback position, right? I mean, the quarterbacks ahead of Justin Herbert are Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, CJ Stroud, and then you have Justin Herbert in year 5. So over the past 2 weeks, it hasn't been great. In reality, if you just take a step back, we can say it was a tough matchup going up against a good Pats defense, tough matchup going up against a good Baltimore Ravens defense. I'm not too worried about him going forward. I do think that he's still going to be a borderline top 5 quarterback. But if you're going over and looking at the flockfantasy.com community rankings, he has fallen down behind Lamar, fallen down behind Dak, and they do have Justin Herbert at QB7. Of course, those are the community rankings on flockfantasy.com. Not exactly how I'm ranking Justin Herbert, just showing how everybody else in the fantasy football community is. And those community rankings are free on flockfantasy.com. If you ever want to pull them up, you don't even need an account. Just go to the rankings page on flockfantasy.com. Now, going over to Austin Ekeler in this offense, now this is where we need to be a little bit concerned. Because with Ekeler, if you're looking at over the past 2 weeks, his yards gained on rush attempts, -1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 5, 5, 6, 6, -7, -2, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 4, 4, 4. Ekeler really doesn't have any juice left, or at least it doesn't look like it, right? I mean, even if you turn on the TV, Austin Ekeler really is not getting anywhere. Even if there's a hole in the offensive line, he can't break away. He can't generate that second gear. If you're going to go ahead and look at what you've had from Austin Ekeler from a points per game perspective in a full PPR format where you are looking at the receiving usage obviously mattering a ton, Austin Ekeler currently is behind Taylor, Pacheco, Jacobs, Henry, White, Barkley, Gibbs, Montgomery, Etienne, Mostert, Kamara, Kyron, Achane, and CMC. Austin Ekeler is currently sitting at about the running back 15 from a points per game perspective, and this is only trending in the wrong direction. You go over to the rankings that you have on flockfantasy.com. The community rankings have Austin Ekeler at running back 7, directly behind Jahmyr Gibbs, directly behind Kyron Williams. And honestly, I think that Austin Ekeler should probably fall even further than this. And I would probably expect that's going to be the case. I think that Ekeler needs to fall behind Rachaad White at the very least. And when I'm going to go through and make my rankings this week, probably going to have Austin Ekeler as a low-end RB1, high-end RB2. And if you go over and look at the underdog pick'em that you have for Austin Ekeler this week, it is a great matchup going up against Denver, but they currently have him at 49.5 rushing yards on Underdog Fantasy. And if we're looking at the amount of weeks that he has hit 50 or more rushing yards, you had the Packers game, the Lions game, and the Miami game in week 1. We've had 3 games this season where Austin Ekeler's had 50 or more rushing yards, and we're going into week 14. So I'll be actually taking the fewer than 49.5 rushing yards for Austin Ekeler on Underdog this week. And of course, if you want to tell me on that, link in the description, link in the comment section. Promo code FLOCK get you 100% deposit match, plus our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers. And a Najee Harris special pick'em more than less than half a total yard for the Thursday night game. Now, I know this is going to be a little bit random, but I kind of want to give a shout out to Lions fans here and say probably should be panicking on the Lions defense. And we should be using this from a fantasy football perspective to start all our options against the Lions going forward. If you're looking at over the past 4 weeks, the Lions gave up 38 to the Chargers, 26 to the Chicago Bears, 29 to the Packers, and now 28 to the New Orleans Saints. So, I mean, if you're looking at the Lions defense, they started off strong at the beginning of the season, but as of late, they're kind of reverting back to the Detroit Lions defense of last season. Now, the next 4 weeks, you have them going up against the Bears, the Broncos, the Vikings, and then for the Fantasy Football Championship, you have them going up against the Dallas Cowboys, which should be a very exciting game. But just heads up, probably want to be looking for options in those offenses going forward. Now, going over to Breeland Hall, this is a running back coming off a nasty game, right? Where you have 13 carries for 16 rushing yards. Now, I know everybody wanted to hit us up in our mentions, screaming at us for calling Breeland Hall that massive sell-high candidate as soon as Aaron Rodgers went down, just saying that this was going to be the worst offense in the league. And if you're looking at what we've had from Breeland Hall, just say over the past 6-7 weeks here, the Atlanta game, 1.2 yards per carry. The Miami game, 3.6 yards per carry. The Bills game, 2.3 yards per carry. The Raiders game, 2.2 yards per carry. The Chargers game, 3.1 yards per carry. The Giants, 1.4 yards per carry. The Eagles, 3.3 yards per carry. I mean, if you're looking at this level of efficiency, I do not want to blame Breeland Hall. You look at Dalvin Cook in this offense, and Dalvin Cook is even worse. It's just the New York Jets offense. We are getting reports coming out of New York saying they want to go back and start Zach Wilson. And Zach Wilson saying, no, man, I'm chilling. I'm not going back in there. I'm going to be standing on the sideline. Y'all figure it out on your own. From a full PPR perspective, Breeland Hall will still be viable based off the usage that he has as a receiver. If you're looking at over the past month, 8, 9, 6, 3 targets. So he has 56 targets this season. So if you're playing in a full PPR league, you should still start Breeland Hall from week to week perspective. But going over to the community rankings on flockfantasy.com, Breeland Hall is currently ahead of Tony Pollard. He's currently ahead of David Montgomery. He's currently ahead of Saquon Barkley. He's currently ahead of Devon Achane, Isaiah Pacheco. I think, honestly, he should probably fall behind all those guys with how bad this offense is. I mean, the implied team total for the Jets this week currently sitting at 14.5 points going up against Houston. Now, let's go over and look at what we have from Javante. Javante was disappointing this week, disappointing last week, right? Where Javante's just simply not scoring. And he's been pretty inefficient as well. Javante only averaging 3.8 yards per carry. However, if you look at the underlying snap data, if you're looking at the usage in this offense as well, Javante's still pretty much getting used as a 3-down workhorse. So really not much has changed with Javante Williams, even if he has been disappointing. Right now, he's RB19 in the flockfantasy.com community rankings. Like I said, these rankings are free. Just go to flockfantasy.com. And there, I think, honestly, he should probably stay. The one thing that you have with Javante Williams, which is going to be brief, is 153 carries this season, and he has 0 rushing touchdowns. I don't necessarily think that's going to continue to be the case going forward. I think that he should be, honestly, probably fine in this offense. Now, going over to CJ Stroud, I would just want to touch base with Stroud quickly because obviously Tank Dell is now out for the year. And Tank Dell has been the best wide receiver for the Houston Texans this season. And Tank Dell was a phenomenal hit for the Houston Texans, getting him in the 3rd round of the NFL draft. I mean, obviously, Tank Dell has a very bright future in the NFL and a very exciting rookie. I've seen some people, however, coming out and saying that this is going to be where the Texans see that step backwards, how they have no weapons left. I want to be on record saying, while Tank Dell is fun and exciting, CJ Stroud's success is significantly more based around CJ Stroud than it is any individual skill positional guy here in Houston. I believe that the supporting cast of Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz, Devin Singletary is probably a below average supporting cast as is. CJ Stroud's going to be just fine. Yes, this was the first week he's had in quite some time under 300 passing yards. He still had 274. If you're looking at the implied team total for this next week for the Houston Texans, the offense should just be fine. Do not worry about Stroud. Maybe instead of him being an elite QB1, maybe he's a mid QB1. But, I mean, he's been great. Things going to keep on being great. I'm not too concerned. Someone I am very concerned with, don't really have him anywhere, but Terry McLaurin, 3 targets, 0 receptions, 0 yards against the Dolphins as this offense absolutely implodes, as this team implodes. If you're looking at the past 4 weeks, they have lost every single week, giving up 29, 31, 45, 45 points. This is a team that at the deadline decided, hey, we're not going to be paying any of these defensive linemen. This is a team at the deadline that decided, you know what, probably best to go through and just burn it down, tank. Let's get rid of our defensive coordinator. Obviously, we have a horrible defense. I don't think it's going to be fixing things anytime soon. The Commanders are in a free fall. They are spiraling down. The reality of the situation, Terry McLaurin's never been a great option in fantasy. I mean, Sam Howell's a top 3 quarterback in the NFL from a passing yardage perspective. Terry McLaurin still's not a good option in fantasy. I mean, y'all know we weren't drafting him coming into the season, saying that Terry McLaurin is a 28-year-old wide receiver that has had 0 seasons as a top 20 option from a points per game perspective. So I want to repeat, Terry McLaurin, 0 seasons as a top 20 wide receiver in a PPR format from a points per game perspective. He's 28 years old. So I don't really know what to say here. Yes, Terry McLaurin's been very disappointing. It's not like Terry McLaurin's ever been an elite fantasy option. Maybe if you're playing Madden, that's the case, but just in fantasy football, I don't know if we want to start this guy going for him. He'll have some random spike weeks, right? And I know we'll make highlight grabs that everybody gets really excited about. Now going over to DeAndre Swift. Swift, horrendous week, 6 carries, 13 rushing yards. Kenneth Gainwell sees more snaps. The reality of the situation is I'm not worried, right? You're going up against San Fran. You get absolutely boat raced. I think that is the primary driver of why you had more Kenneth Gainwell, why you had less DeAndre Swift. Swift did get banged up at the end of the game. That will be something to monitor, but from what I've read, sounds like DeAndre Swift should be good to go. So if Swift is healthy, it's still going to be a running back that is a starter for the Philadelphia Eagles. One of the best offenses in the NFL, has a role as a receiver, somewhat has a role inside the red zone as well. So honestly, I'm not too worried about DeAndre Swift. And if somehow your trade deadline is not already passed, I honestly would potentially be looking to buy him low. Now, Jaylen Warren is a running back that I do want to talk about here in that with Warren, he's been extremely efficient all season, but it simply does not matter. I mean, I think everybody thought that you would potentially have Jaylen Warren taking over as the starting running back once you had Matt Canada out of this offense. And almost the exact opposite's happened over the past 2 weeks, where they've actually leaned a little bit more on Najee Harris than what you've seen with Jaylen Warren. Jaylen Warren, 9 carries this week, 13 carries last week. This is the first week in quite some time where Najee Harris had the vast majority of the snaps in Pittsburgh. And it was a game environment where they were trailing the entire time going up against the Arizona Cardinals. They ended up losing 10-24. So I don't know, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, with Warren, I just kind of want to reiterate, well, yeah, he had the massive weeks, the 101 rushing yards, rushing touchdown, 129 rushing yards, rushing touchdown. While he's used as a receiver, I still think that he's just a premium handcuff, where if you were to have Najee Harris go down, I would rank Jaylen Warren as a top 10 running back in fantasy immediately, but he just doesn't have that role. Now, I want to stay in Pittsburgh, looking at Deontay Johnson, looking at George Pickens, and I know a lot of people are going to be very frustrated about Kenny Pickett getting injured. And the reality of the situation is, well, yeah, Mitchell Trubisky is very bad. It's not like Kenny Pickett's great. Kenny Pickett's had one game in his NFL career with more than one passing touchdown. Something Joe Flacco did this past week, right? So, I mean, I don't want to sit here and act like it's a good thing No, of course, it's not a good thing Trubisky's in here. But it's not like Deontay Johnson or George Pickens were a top 20 wide receiver in fantasy, and now that they're no longer startable. The reality of the situation is the passing volume may take a small hit, but it's not going to be anything dramatic in Pittsburgh. And for them playing on Thursday night, I do want to remind y'all, go take advantage of Najee Harris in this offense. More than half a total yard on Underdog Fantasy. If you use promo code FLOCK on Underdog, that's how you're going to get that. Also, with promo code FLOCK, 100% deposit match our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers. And I'm going to be going with fewer than 49.5 rushing yards for Austin Ekeler, who's only hit that 3 times so far this season on Underdog this week. But thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. I really do appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day, and really hope we get to see you out with the live stream later tonight.